During a Treasury Select Committee hearing this week, Rachel Reeves made a remark that has since generated headlines, commentary, and online speculation. Some dismissed it as routine, others described it as unusual, and a number of political commentators, particularly on social media, have gone further, arguing that Reeves may have thrown Keir Starmer under the bus. This claim did not emerge from partisan noise alone. It emerged because of a single very specific statement Reeves made while under questioning about the budget, its tax rises, and the government's broader economic strategy. Here is a clip of the exchange.
You decided to change the decision not in terms of raising the rate of income tax in those 10 days.
The Prime Minister has been clear that that was one of the things that we looked at, but we were also looking at the tax thresholds. In the end, because of the decisions we made on higher value council tax, on property and dividends, and a number of other measures, we were able to keep the contribution from working people as low as we possibly could.
Did you make that decision, or did the Prime Minister?
Well, the Prime Minister and I met 2-3 times a week during the budget process. That is not always the case between Chancellors and Prime Ministers, I recognise that, but there is a very close partnership between myself and the Prime Minister, and so we took him through all of these all of the numbers and all of the options, and we decided it together as a team, because that is what the Prime Minister and I am.
That sentence instantly set off a wave of interpretation. Specifically, when she said, "The Prime Minister and I met 2 to 3 times a week during the budget process." That is not always the case between Chancellors and Prime Ministers. I recognise that. But there is a very close partnership between myself and the Prime Minister. That sentence instantly set off a wave of interpretation. Not because Reeves criticised the PM, she didn't. Not because she blamed him, she didn't. But because she emphasised something unusual. She made a point of noting that Starmer's involvement in the budget was deeper, more frequent, and more hands-on than is typical for a Prime Minister. And in a political movement where tax rises are under intense scrutiny, that emphasis carried weight far beyond the committee room. This brings us to the central question: why did this comment stand out so sharply? The answer lies in the contrast Reeves herself created. Prime Ministers always play some role in shaping the budget. That is normal. When budget day arrives, a Prime Minister does not discover tax changes with the rest of the country. Prime Ministers always play a role in shaping the budget. That is normal. But Reeves didn't simply say that Starmer approved the decisions. She highlighted that they met multiple times a week. She stressed that this level of involvement is not always the case for PM-Chancellor relationships.
Well, the Prime Minister and I met 2-3 times a week during the budget process. That is not always the case between Chancellors and Prime Ministers, I recognise that, but there is a very close partnership between myself and the Prime Minister.
She framed the relationship as unusually close and unusually active in the precise period where the most controversial and unpopular tax rising measures were being made. This framing matters because political language is rarely accidental. Analysts across the spectrum noticed that Reeves did not downplay Starmer's involvement, she magnified it. And with the budget containing some of the least popular tax measures in years, that magnification quickly became the root of claims that she may have been widening the circle of responsibility. Again, she did not directly shift blame, but she did shape the narrative in a way that placed the Prime Minister at the heart of decisions voters were questioning, and that is where the perception took root. To understand why her commitment triggered such a reaction, we must also consider the wider political context. The UK is navigating a difficult economic environment. High taxes, frozen thresholds, weaker growth forecasts, and persistent household pressures following years of inflation and rising costs. And during the 2024 campaign, Labour repeatedly assured the public that they would not raise taxes on working people, a central pledge that helped them win the election. Labour's Manifesto, the document that helped deliver their historical landslide victory, states, "The Conservatives have raised the tax burden to a 70-year high. We will ensure taxes on working people are kept as low as possible. Labour will not increase taxes on working people, which is why we will not increase national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT. And then, in the 2024 budget, Reeves stated plainly that freezing income tax thresholds was more of a move that would hurt working people and would, in her words, breach the manifesto. She had used this argument against the Conservatives repeatedly. Here is a clip from the budget in 2024 where she states this.
The previous government froze income tax and national insurance thresholds in 2021, and then they did so again after the mini-budget. Extending their threshold freeze for a further 2 years raises billions of pounds, money to deal with the black hole in our public finances and repair our public services. Having considered this issue closely, I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their payslips. I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto. So there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds beyond the decisions by the previous government. From 2028-29, personal tax thresholds will be uprated in line with inflation once again. When it comes to choices on tax, this government chooses to protect working people every single time.
What makes this moment so striking and why so many observers reacted so sharply is the contrast between what Rachel Reeves argued in 2024 and what she is now defending in the government. In 2024, she framed the threshold freeze as a policy that would hurt working people, take money out of their payslips and breach a core manifesto promise. She did not present the threshold freeze as a neutral tool or an unfortunate necessity. She presented it as a direct violation of Labour's pledge to protect working households from a stealth tax rise. And now, less than a year later, the very measure she criticised as unfair and harmful to working people is being extended under her own leadership, only this time with the Prime Minister's involvement explicitly highlighted. That is the key point political analysts have noticed. Reeves did not simply defend the freeze as a fiscal necessity. She placed Starmer in the room, in the meetings, in the decision-making, and at the heart of the process. She emphasised that this was not her decision alone. It was a joint decision, taken in unusually close coordination with the Prime Minister. For critics, this is where the perception of throwing Starmer under the bus began. Reeves, knowingly or not, drew a direct line between an unpopular tax outcome and the Prime Minister's hands-on role in shaping it. For supporters, it was simply a factual description of how this government operates. Supporters of the Chancellor highlight that. She was explaining that she and the Prime Minister work closely, coordinate decisions, and are aligned in navigating a difficult fiscal landscape. In this reading, her comment reflects unity, not deflection. It signals a government operating as a coherent whole. Critics, meanwhile, see her phrasing differently. They point to one word in particular: unusual. Reeves didn't merely say that she and Starmer collaborated, she said his involvement was not always the case for previous PMs. That comparison opened the door to political interpretation. When decisions are unpopular, anything that highlights shared responsibility can be read as a subtle redistribution of blame. Critics argue that Reeves' emphasis, especially under pressure, may have been a way of ensuring that the public understand the Prime Minister had been deeply involved in shaping the budget. Not to undermine him, but to avoid standing alone in the firing line. This interpretation is not universally accepted, but it explains why the phrase "under the bus" entered public conversation. The timing of Reeves' comment also mattered. She didn't say this months before the budget or during a quiet political moment. She said it while facing intense questions about tax rises, fiscal choices, and the government's economic strategy. In that environment, every word is examined closely. So when she highlighted that the Prime Minister was more involved than usual during such a controversial period, it naturally drew attention, even if she only intended to show that they work closely as a team. When pressure is high, timing shapes how statements are interpreted. It also helps to remember how PM-Chancellor relationships usually work. Some leaders, like Blair and Brown, had well-known tension. Others, like Cameron and Osborne, worked almost as a single unit. Most operate somewhere in between. The Chancellor leads the budget and the Prime Minister signs off on the main decisions. Meeting 2 or 3 times a week during the budget process suggests a much closer partnership than normal. Reeves was simply describing how they worked, but saying this publicly, at a time of scrutiny, created room for interpretation. Some people saw unity, others saw shared responsibility. The reaction grew out of that uncertainty, not because Reeves criticised Starmer. Public confidence in Labour's economic management has taken a sharp and unexpected hit. After months of rising taxes, frozen thresholds, and difficult fiscal messaging, frustration is beginning to show in the polls. Voters who backed Labour in 2024 on the promise of stability and economic competence are now questioning whether the government is delivering what it promised. And in that climate of uncertainty, new polling has delivered a striking and uncomfortable verdict, one that few have predicted even a year ago. Sir Keir Starmer's government is now less trusted on the economy than the Conservatives were under Liz Truss, a damning new poll has revealed. Asked who they would trust with the economy, a YouGov poll showed 10% of people said Labour, fewer than those who said they would trust Ms Truss, who presided over a shambolic tenure of economy as Prime Minister. Some 17% said they would trust the Tories on the economy, 13% that they would trust Reform UK, 8% said they would trust the Green Party, and 5% said they would trust the Liberal Democrats. In October 2022, the month after her disastrous mini-budget, which spooked the financial markets in 2022 and led to a spike in mortgage rates and her eventual resignation, some 15% of voters said that they would trust the Conservatives with the economy. Ms Truss, who was famously outlasted in power by a lettuce, has defended her time as Prime Minister and repeatedly blamed a failed Treasury orthodoxy for problems during her premiership. In the end, the question of whether Rachel Reeves threw Keir Starmer under the bus comes down to interpretation. She never criticised the Prime Minister directly, and she never claimed the budget was his alone. But by emphasising his unusually deep involvement during a moment of tax rises, public frustration, and declining trust in Labour's economic management, she opened the door to a narrative that quickly took on a life of its own. Some see her comments as simple transparency. Others believe she was broadening the frame of responsibility as criticism grows. What is clear is that her wording, timing, and the political climate all combine to create a story that neither she nor Starmer can easily ignore. So what do you think? Was Rachel Reeves subtly shifting blame onto Starmer, or was she simply explaining how the government works? Let us know in the comments below.